Welcome to the L&D Go Beyond Podcast. This season, we're digging into how skilling, smarter learning design, and emerging AI tools are reshaping real workplace capability. You'll hear practical insights from leaders tackling the gaps between training, performance, and what work now demands. Get ready to go beyond. Enjoy the conversation.
Everyone, thank you for joining us with this and Kickoff Season 3 of the Go Beyond Podcast, a campaign that is designed to unearth actionable insights from practitioners and innovators, and to challenge learning professionals to think beyond course delivery toward performance-driven, business-connected learning solutions. This series focuses on workforce transformation in the age of AI, exploring the shift from knowledge and skills to capabilities, and how AI can be leveraged to reshape learning experiences and be aligned with the business goals and objectives. I am Venudhar Bhatt, part of the leadership team at Mitra Learning and Media and Upside Learning. I'm delighted to welcome our guest today, Dr. Keating, to the Go Beyond podcast. Dr. Keating is a renowned learning innovator, workforce futurist, and chief learning officer who champions lifelong learning as the key to career and organizational success. As the author of a couple of books, one of them being The Trusted Learning Advisor, he guides learning and development professionals to shift from order takers to strategic partners shaping the future of work. Today's conversation is about learning at a crossroad, where rapid technological change is forcing us to rethink how learning truly creates value. We'll explore what makes AI different from past trends and what this moment means for the L&D leaders driving innovation. Over the last 2 decades, learning has seen many next big things. You must recall things like MOOCs, mobile learning, VR and AR, each of them promising to change everything. Most did not, at least not in the way we were told. Today, AI or artificial intelligence is the new headline or the trend. So the real question is, will history repeat itself? Though I believe this time it would be different. Earlier trends focused on a single format, assuming one size fits all learning. AI stands apart from that in 2 ways. First, it is fundamentally reshaping businesses, products, and workflows, changing what the workflow does and how it works, and creating an urgent need for reskilling and upskilling. Second, AI is transforming how learning can be designed and delivered through things like personalization, use of AI agents, performance support, and many new multiple approaches that can be conceptualized and produced. And it's not just about one format like micro-learning or video-based courses or anything like that. So this time it's going to be different. Further, I just read about an article from Board of Innovation that describes this particular phase as a liminal phase, moving from the old world into a new paradigm. Like electricity or digital age, before that, AI adoption is expected to unfold in 3 waves, which could be characterized by efficiency, then quality, and then full transformation. L&D today is largely in wave 1, with wave 2 set to accelerate from 2026 onwards. That's why I've been eager to speak with you, Dr. Keating, as a seasoned practitioner and the author of the book, The Trusted Learning Advisor. That's because I believe the role of the Trusted Learning Advisor has never been more critical than it is today. Thank you for joining me today and for being willing to share your experience and insights, not just with me, but by this podcast with many others around the world. To start us off, I'd love for you to briefly introduce yourself in your own words and share what the book, The Trusted Learning Advisor, is all about.
Absolutely.
Welcome.
And thank you again for having me here. So I'm a lifelong learner, but also a career-long learning and development practitioner. I've been in the field for about 25 years. I've played every role within the industry. Currently, I'm the Chief Learning Officer for BDO Canada. I'm a professor at a couple of different universities in an adjunct role, and I've written both The Trusted Learning Advisor and Hidden Value: How to Reveal the Impact of Organizational Learning. So in terms of the Trusted Learning Advisor, this book is part manifesto, it's part guide, part toolkit, part motivational mentor that is supporting every level of L&D or talent practitioner to help us develop the skills and the capabilities that we need to be strategic business partners, to be embedded in the business so that we understand the business better than our stakeholders. We need to be able to provide a tremendous amount of value for our organizations, and we ultimately do that by supporting the most important resource in any organization, and that's our talent. And this book is not a sit down, read the book cover to cover, and then be done with it. This is something that I expect and hope that learning development leaders and practitioners will have on their desk, as I do here, and still flip through it so that it can be a part of their journey, their transformational journey. And when a situation arises, a new client, a difficult relationship, or they're still receiving that order as an order taker, they can go to the guide, open up the chapter on that topic, digest what's really there, and apply it. It's not a thought leadership book based on theories. It's filled with actionable strategies based on my 25 years experience and a number of my colleagues across the industry.
Right. I just saw one of your posts and videos about you being a practitioner and not a thought leader, and so meaningful. And that's exactly why I wanted to have you with us on this podcast and talk about and answer the question that I have for the benefit of all the L&D leaders who are listening to us. So while everybody is talking about the impact of AI and excited about the possibilities, what has been disconcerting recently is to see many reports of failed AI pilots across the world. Okay, many of our listeners may also have experienced challenges and failures with respect to adoption of AI in the L&D, activities or workflows. Despite that, one needs to remain focused and keep in the pursuit of innovation and push forward to the wave 2. So how do you believe this can affect the L&D leaders and their ability to play the role of a trusted learning advisor?
One thing to keep in mind when we talk about failure, to me, FAIL is a 4-letter acronym. First attempt in learning. So failure is part of our everyday process. That aside, I want to start by reframing the premise slightly, because I think this is where we get ourselves in trouble. Most AI pilots don't fail because the technology failed. They fail because the trust, the context, and the intent of what that pilot is for were never clearly established in the first place. And of course, this is not unique to AI. We've been here before with every major shift in learning. You talked about MOOCs and VR. I mean, 10 years ago, everything was going to be VR. AI is just exposing those cracks a little bit faster now because it is so adoptable, or it is so relevant and ready, available to us. So when trust is lost after a failed or suboptimal initiative, the instinct is it's often to retreat, to go quiet, to wait until maybe that next shiny object come along. And that's really worse, because trust isn't rebuilt by perfection. Trust is rebuilt by the behavior that we show. And so from a trusted learning advisor perspective, managing that risk comes down to a few activities. Number one, Be honest about what happened. Don't over defend the pilot. Don't overhype the lesson. Acknowledge what worked, what didn't, and why. Leaders trust transparency far more than the spin of trying to make it more grandiose than it actually was. And this goes back to my first point about fail, first attempt in learning. When it does fail for me, it's acknowledging a data point of what didn't work. So there's still a value proposition there. The second approach is re-anchoring that conversation to outcomes, not the tools. So if the discussion becomes AI didn't work, then you've already lost the plot. The real question is, what outcome were we trying to achieve? And what did we learn about how to get there? AI is just one lever that's possible to pull in order to get there. Number three is maybe slow the next decision down, not speed it up. So one failed initiative doesn't mean that we stop experimenting. It just means that sometimes we tighten the diagnosis, we revisit context, we clarify our readiness, we make smaller, safer bets to rebuild confidence faster than more potential big relaunches. And then fourth, we want to separate credibility from novelty. And what I mean by that is trust is damaged when we look like we're chasing tools instead of solving problems. And I go back to the VR days, and I can remember it so distinctly. Every stakeholder would come say, hey, we need a VR pilot. We need to do VR, do VR, do VR. Why? What you're talking about and the work that you do is not going to benefit from VR. Yeah, but we just need to do it. So credibility is rebuilt when stakeholders feel helped, not impressed. And that means that we have to show judgment and sometimes say, no, this isn't the best tool to use to get the outcome that we're looking for. So we have to be clear about what AI does and does not make sense for in the organization. So yes, trust can be lost after a failed AI initiative, but it's rarely lost because the tool didn't work. It's lost when, again, stakeholders feel misled or rushed or unclear about why the work mattered. And so the role for us as trusted learning advisors is to hold that line on judgment, context, and transparency. That's what's going to deepen the trust.
Yeah, I absolutely, understand and agree with that idea. And one more thing, which to a certain extent would be applicable to other trends also, but here in particular is from my experience in working with some AI product development and other initiatives, what I've observed is the ability for AI to deliver on our expectations, be aligned with our goals, is constantly improving at a rapid pace, unlike the previous, trends or whatever. So if we are not, driven by novelty to say, okay, I'm doing something with VR or something like that, or we are doing something about leveraging AI, but if we are focused on the outcomes and we are clear about the solution, we can wait until we find the right tool that meets our needs well, and then go after it again. So if we stick to what we really want and check our solutions against that the tools are supporting it or not, I think we can continue on that path forward with confidence, right? And so I so that brings me to the other question is, according to various reports that got published, at the end of 2025 led to many reports being published. Many of them talked about the use of AI in the learning and development function. And it highlighted that a majority of that was focused on efficiency, which is the characteristic of wave one. And it was used for tasks like translations, AI voiceovers, which is basically an incremental improvement in terms of time and cost of the content development workflows. Some other things were also tried and, which met with mixed success, I guess. But this was the primary usage, maybe more than 60, 65% as per one of the reports. Now, anyone who wants to advance to wave 2, which focuses on quality, relevance, and effectiveness, will need to have a sound strategy for the purpose and will need to pick up things that are really important for the organization to prepare its workforce, make the shift from skills to capabilities and things like that. And in order to achieve all of that, what would be your guidance to the L&D leaders?
I think right now the biggest risk for us is that we become too comfortable in wave 1. Speed, efficiency, productive. Cost reduction looks good on a slide, but that over optimization has a ceiling. And so you eventually reach a point where you're doing the wrong things faster. And wave 2 requires a different posture. Wave 2 is about the quality, the relevance, the effectiveness, and you don't get there through the tools. You get there through trust. That's why becoming a trusted learning advisor is not optional. It's the entry ticket to wave 2. So wave 1, we're rewarded for our responsiveness. Wave 2, we're trusted for our judgment. And that trust doesn't come from technology. It comes from our behavior. And so this is where the 5 pillars of trust matter more than ever. And I introduced these in the Trusted Learning Advisor. We've got credibility. So credibility means that your recommendations are grounded in learning science and business reality, not hype. Second one is reliability, which means that you do what you say you're going to do, especially when experimentation doesn't go so perfectly. Number 3 in the pillars are intimacy, which means stakeholders feel safe having honest conversations with you about what's not really working. Number 4 is our professional communication, which means that you can translate learning into the language of the business, into outcomes and priorities that leaders ultimately care about. Number 5 in the 5 pillars of trust is intent. And it means that it's clear that you're here to help the business succeed, not to just push a tool, a solution, or your own agenda. And without those pillars, wave 2 conversations don't happen. And this is where the 70-20-10 rule becomes less about design and more about influence. Wave 1 tends to over-focus on the 10%, the content, courses, assets. Wave 2 forces us to engage on the 70 and 20 part, how the work actually happens, how people learn from each other, how managers reinforce or undermine capability every day. And that requires communication, dialogue, coaching, feedback. So wave 2 is not, in my opinion, a technical upgrade. It's more of a human one, where there's judgment, decision-making, critical thinking, communication. Often these are referred to as soft skills, but I call them power skills because these are our human skills. These are the skills that we absolutely need to be successful. And they determine whether any technical capability actually turns into performance. And this is the shift that L&D leaders and practitioners need to be making. So it's the difference between staying busy, or becoming indispensable.
Right. I once read a book, about innovation, and it differentiated it into 2 definitions. One is sustainable innovation, and the other is a transformative innovation. It was from, I think, Clayton Christensen. He's an author and an expert, and it defines sustainable innovation as one aimed towards efficiency, right? So which is where you make things cheaper, better, faster, whatever, slightly. But transformative innovation is something which completely changes how things were done in the past or the product itself and things like that. And that's pretty disruptive. Okay, so that's could also be disruptive innovation to that extent. And it fascinated me, and I think I love the idea to distinguish. And I think this wave 2 is about shifting towards transformation with, the innovation in mind. And what you rightly said, one needs to think about it in alignment with the business objectives, right? As a trusted learning advisor, what I think is on top of our business leaders today is trying to really understand how AI is influencing their own business as a whole. How is it going to change how their own people work? Or what kind of workforce skills are required? And how do you define, manage, and transform skills at the pace with which AI is expected to change things, right? And to remain competitive. And so, in light of all of this, once again, obviously, doing what a trusted learning advisor does becomes really critical. Having the voice, walking with the leadership, thinking with them, all of them becomes very important. So, any other parts of your frameworks that you've talked about in the book that become important or critical to keep in mind and use them?
I would say the biggest mistake that people make with ideas of frameworks is that they treat them as concepts to understand rather than behaviors to practice. Specifically, the trusted learning advisor isn't meant to be inspirational reading, it's meant to be applied. So if an L&D practitioner wants to actually build and implement a trusted advisor mindset, there are three practical ways that they can start to do this. The first is use the framework to change how conversations begin. So most interactions start with a request. We need training. Can you build a program? Can you roll this out quickly? The frameworks in the Trusted Learning Advisor teach leaders to pause and to diagnose before responding. And that means you're training your team to ask better questions consistently. What problem are we trying to solve? What will success look like in the business? What happens if nothing changes? This one shift alone moves a team from order taking to consulting. The second approach is use the trust pillars in the book as a development lens for your team. So as a reminder, those 5 pillars: credibility, reliability, intimacy, professional communication, and intent are not abstract ideas. They are observable behaviors, and leaders can use them to coach their teams. Where is trust strongest today? Where is it fragile? Which pillar breaks down most often under pressure? Which pillar would our stakeholders say that we are weakest in? Not just our own perspective. And so instead of generic capability models, you have a way now, you have a trust-based way to develop L&D practitioners in the skills that actually matter to stakeholders. And then number 3 is use the frameworks to define success. So if your team is measured primarily on activity, speed, volume, you're getting wave 1 behaviors, efficiency over effectiveness. So trusted learning advisors the work that we do requires different signals of success. Were we involved early? Did we influence the direction of the solution? Did the business make a better decision because we were in the room? Did we offer a point of view, a fact-based, a data-based, research-based point of view? Leaders have to make those outcomes visible and then reward them, or that mindset isn't going to stick. So ultimately, the fastest way to implement the trusted learning advisor mindset is to practice it yourself in every interaction. In the end, becoming a trusted learning advisor isn't about adopting a single framework. It's about changing how you show up, how you listen, how you help the business make better decisions.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of some of my conversations with other folks in the community, where when all of this started and this discussion about how do we prepare the workforce, everybody started looking for maybe some off-the-shelf courses on AI, how to use it. While some of them could be useful, but without the context of what your workforce really needs and needs for the purpose of doing what they're doing better, right? Just throwing a set of courses saying this is how you use this tool or that tool may not and did not get many of them the results they expected, other than getting a checkbox, you know, that, yeah, you did something about it. And so order taking, as you say that, right, will not help achieve anything substantial or gain any value. But just having a conversation, coming and talking to your stakeholders, understanding what is it that they need to get accomplished, and then making an attempt to explain what better solutions could be there or what alternative methods could be used to achieve those goals can help get the organization to achieve success, right?
Absolutely. I mean,
So
if you
yeah.
just think about AI,
Mhm.
AI is a much better order taker than humans will ever be. So if you are just playing the role of an order taker, you're already redundant.
Exactly. True, absolutely. And what we do today, many of those things will become faster, cheaper, or automated. And so the L&D leaders need to think about is look at it as a very powerful tool that you are getting, and think about how you're going to really use it to change things, not because you have to change them, but because you have to work in this change environment. If you don't do it, somebody else will do it and beat you, right? Or it's okay. You could also adopt best practices, or somebody else would have set an example, but doing it for the purpose that it should be done, connecting it, not just because you saw something being done, right? So having said that, a lot of people also end up adopting AI powered tools and platforms. Many of them got launched last year, right? And okay, looks like this platform really allows us to clone ourselves or create some really highly realistic avatars, or be able to do this or that, and then be tempted to sort of adopt them and use them for the next course that comes your way to be developed, right? So a lot of people have gone into that and then have experienced mixed success. Some may have, but many of these experiments have failed. But we all experts, or experts actually understand that tools and technology are only a means to a goal. They need to be used purposefully in a very strategic manner. And so a thoughtful framework needs to be used to select the initiatives. And mark my word here, initiatives, not the tools. Tools are just a choice once you know what you want to get done. Where AI needs to be leveraged, and then carefully build the complete solution around that. So from your book, I thought the IDAD framework could have a potential use to be used, for selecting which initiatives need to use such AI tools or have such solutions developed. So how do you think one should use that framework?
If you don't have a disciplined way to think, then tools become your strategy. And that's a recipe for failure. This is where the IDAD or IDAD framework came in for me. And so IDAD stands for identify, diagnose, analyze, and design. And what matters most is that the model forces us to almost earn the right to use the technology rather than defaulting to it. So let me walk you through how this applies to AI. I for identify. This is where most teams rush. Identification is not, we want to use AI or we need faster content. Identification is the business problem or the capability gap that actually matters. What's not working today? Where's the performance breaking down? What risk exists if nothing else changes? If AI enters the conversation here, it's already too early. Then we move into the D for diagnose. So diagnosis is where the judgment shows up. This is where we ask why the problem exists. Is it a skill issue, a workflow issue, a leadership issue, a clarity or incentive issue? Because many problems, as you know, look like learning problems, but they aren't. And many that look like content problems are actually behavior or environment problems. And so if we skip the diagnosis, then AI just helps us scale the wrong solution. So then we move into the A for analyze. In the analyze phase, this is now when we can start to consider options. This is where AI can be explored along other tools. What are possible approaches? What are the trade-offs for using it, for not using it? What fits our context in our organization, our maturity, our risk tolerance? Sometimes AI is the right choice. Other times it's not, and that's the point. The IDAD model gives you permission to say no or not yet with credibility because you're following a structured framework. And that leads us to the D for design. And so if AI is the right lever, then design becomes intentional, not opportunistic. What should this solution actually enable people to do differently? Where does speed matter and where does quality matter more? What does success look like beyond we just launched something? So that when people ask us, how do we use AI in learning? My answer is we don't start there. We start with the IDAD model, because when you lead with identification and diagnosis, then AI becomes an accelerator. But when you skip them, then AI just becomes that efficient distraction, potential default. So the IDAD model protects us from fitting AI into everything, where we have a hammer and everything looks like a nail to us. And that's how we stay strategic and how we stay credible.
Yeah. So as we spoke, an AI does not need to be the prime criteria for pushing or introducing or suggesting that particular design or the solution. How at the same time, AI, unlike any other things, is not going to result into predictable outcomes. We've seen that, and also because we're doing it for the first time, number of things that we're trying, there is this potential risk for failure. So there needs to be a lot of experimentation, creating small pilots, validating our ideas, and so on and so forth, which is not very common with many other things that initiatives have, where the stakeholders will understand and say, okay, let's invest in a pilot, and we know it may or may not work, or let's do this. And particularly when a lot of pilots are failing, right? So there is going to be resistance to these new ideas or these transformative ideas that L&D leaders may come up with. And I would like to ask, what would be your suggestion to these leaders to navigate through this resistance and get support for their ideas that truly deserve support?
Recognize that resistance at this stage is completely normal. I'd argue that it's actually healthy, because wave 2 asks leaders to invest before everything is proven. It's asking them to care about quality, relevance, effectiveness, not just speed. And in this day and age, when budgets and risk and credibility are on the line, a no is often a signal of uncertainty, not opposition. And so the mistake that we can make is responding to that resistance by pushing harder or going on the other end of the spectrum and just pulling back entirely. And so the better move, in my opinion, is to start smaller and smarter. And this is where minimum viable products, or MVPs, become incredibly powerful. Instead of pitching a fully redefined learning system, start with a narrow, high-value use case. Skills mapping for a critical role, a personalized learning journey for a small population, an assessment that improves decision-making in one area of the business. Make the scope small, make the intent clear, make the success criteria very explicit. And an MVP reframes the conversation from trust us to let us show you. It lowers that psychological risk for stakeholders. So when resistance shows up, I encourage leaders to slow the conversation a bit and ask more questions. That approach does two things. One, it builds confidence. Stakeholders see judgment, not just enthusiasm or excitement for a tool. They see our discipline. Second, it creates evidence. So once an MVP shows improved quality or relevance or effectiveness, then that conversation changes. You're not asking for belief anymore. You're pointing to the results. And that's where that trust starts to compound. So my advice is simple. Don't fight the resistance. Design for the resistance. Use MVPs to prove value. Use pilots to build credibility. And wave 2 is less about moving fast and more about moving wisely. That's how support is earned.
Right. On the other end, I think this is not for the L&D leaders, but their stakeholders or sponsors for their budgets. Do you think one different thing that must be done by them this year? Of course, many of them would have already set budgets for 2026, but say a certain percentage of the entire budget should be allocated towards MVPs. Have that not defined in advance what those MVPs will be all about, but consciously invest in experiments of this nature to prepare for the push to the wave 3, which is transformative. Unless you experiment, you fail in a manner that you just mentioned, right? Earlier at the start of this podcast, and try things out. It is not possible directly to jump from one wave to another and to the last one, right? And so, what do you think? I mean, should all companies set a budget for such innovation, or such MVPs that would help them sort of push forward in the right direction?
I'm cautious about making generalized statements, so I don't want to say all companies should.
Okay.
But from the perspective of, is there value in creating a safe space that's already planned for where you can fail? You can fail, fast forward, quickly get up off your feet and keep trying. There is significant value in having that type of space and creating a culture where it's expected that that's going to happen. So from that perspective, yes.
Right. And so, given that we're talking about the third wave, which is transformative in nature, it is based on the fact that the real power of AI lies in enabling things that were not possible to be accomplished before. Because with the traditional methods, it may be either impossible or very expensive or very time consuming. And a lot of these things are being changed by AI. Now, what would you suggest that the trusted learning advisors do, in aligning with the CEOs and the boards to support the L&D function to make a shift from being just a support function to a strategic capability building engine? That itself is very transformative in nature and can be accomplished with the use of AI based solutions, in my view. But this is not something which is with a very certain outcome, like we just discussed, right? So, how do you suggest that this long term, how do you act today with that long term in mind?
There's a few approaches that we need to take. The first one is recognizing that what we do, we have to anchor learning directly to strategy and risk. Boards don't fund learning because it's nice to have. They care about growth, resilience, succession, regulatory exposure, innovation, execution risk. So workforce transformation and skill building sits underneath all of those. And our role is to make that connection explicit. Which capabilities are mission critical to our future strategy? Where are the most dangerous skill gaps emerging? What happens if we don't reskill or upskill fast enough? When learning is framed as a risk mitigation approach and a growth enablement, that's when it starts to move out of that support category. The second activity or approach is that we have to elevate the conversation from programs to capability systems. CEOs and boards, They don't want a catalog of courses. When you go to our online digital platform, we've got 10,000 courses in there. That's not what they want. They want confidence that the organization can adapt. Change is our new normal. Organizations have to pivot now overnight. Are our most valuable resource, are people able to pivot to keep the organization successful? That's where we bring a systems view. The skill mapping is tied directly to strategy. We have role-based capabilities. We have personalized learning journeys that connect to real work. This is how learning becomes an infrastructure, not an activity. And third, we speak the language of evidence and foresight. So wave 3 isn't proving what learning did last year. It's about showing how the organization is being prepared for what's coming next. Think about futures literacy. We're bringing that insight forward. Here, capability is strengthening. Here is where it's fragile. Here's where we're testing, learning, and refining. And that posture, it builds confidence at the top of the organization. It signals that we have judgment, not just experimentation for the sake of it. I would say, lastly, it's about our human stewardship. It's about making sure that we're keeping the human in the forefront of everything that we're doing. We're reskilling, we're upskilling, and not as abstract initiatives, but to ensure that people feel equipped. Being a trusted learning advisor ensures that the organization transforms, that people are brought along with it. That's the biggest fear, is that our people are going to be left behind. And so that capability is built with intent. It's built with equity and clarity. So in wave 3, alignment with CEOs and boards, it's not about asking for permission or for a budget. It's about showing that learning is how strategy becomes executable. That's what they care about.
Right. And that makes me think about one more thing, is like data is the new gold, as they say, and AI only enables the L&D leaders to plan what data they need and how to leverage that for the kind of initiatives you spoke about, how to do assessments or collect data for performance on the field and connect that with the personalized learning journeys and qualifying, because earlier the feedback or there were poor measures of success for a program or a goal to be accomplished. But right now, I think there's a lot. So AI, once understood as an enabler, you need a solid strategy to see how are you going to collect, clean, and process the data to guide your strategy. And I think AI can play a wonderful role out there to bring in this transformation aligned with the organizational goals and what it really needs to do to excel in the age of AI, right? So with that, I'd like to wrap up with one question: that what is one of the most important things in 2026 that you would suggest that L&D leaders need to keep in mind, that is in the year 2026? One thing.
Change is happening faster than ever. It's happening exponentially. It's our new normal. One thing that practitioners need to hold on to is that our job is no longer to keep up with change. It's to make sense of it. We've got a volume of tools and trends and opinions, and it's not slowing down. And speed is no longer a differentiator. Efficiency is now just table stakes. So what separates high impact practitioners from everyone else is judgment. 2026, organizations don't need more learning content. We have hundreds of thousands of pieces of content available. Organizations need clarity. They need people who understand their context. Context, they understand it deeply enough to decide what matters, what doesn't matter, what can wait. And that means knowing your organization's universe better than anyone else in the room, because your organization is your universe. The culture, the constraints, the maturity, the risk tolerance, the business priorities. your organization is your universe. And so practitioners who slow down conversations when everyone else is rushing to act, they're the ones who are going to be able to diagnose before they design. They'll be able to challenge requests respectfully, but confidently. This is where credibility matters more than ever, because technology can generate answers instantly, but trust is earned through our behavior. So 2026, it's going to reward practitioners who move from reacting to shaping, from delivering what's asked for to influencing what gets asked for in the first place. It will reward practitioners who stay anchored in purpose based on the context of their organization. Not what Keith says, not what Josh Burson says, but what is important, imperative, and necessary for your organization. And that work it's hard. There's scrutiny that comes along with it. There can be pressure to prove value in ways that it's not always neat and immediate. So the takeaway is not learning every new tool or adopting every new trend. It's being the practitioner who brings judgment, context, and humanity into a world that's obsessed with speed right now. That's what's going to matter most.
Sure. So if I were to sort of put it into the shortest possible form, do focus on what really matters. And what you responded really defines how to identify that and put it up in the front that, yes, this is what should be our focus. And that's a great takeaway, I'm sure. So if there's one takeaway from today's conversation, it's this, that the learning leaders must stop chasing trends and think about how to start creating value, right? And AI gives us powerful tools, but that won't give us the impact. The impact comes from how we intentionally use them. So, Keith, I would like to once again thank you for your time and for sharing such practical wisdom. As you've said rightly, you're a practitioner, and every word that you shared with us or the piece of advice you gave us, I think is critical. It's been a privilege having you on the podcast.